An archaeologist can examine a society in a number of ways. He studies their eating habits, mode of transportation, dress styles, even their money and economic activity. Archaeologists, though, they keep going back to a study that's given them the best insight. You know what it is? It's their garbage dump, their landfill. It's the place where they dump their garbage. And you can find there old newspapers loaded with information of the time, old clothes, wagon wheels, plowshares, children's dolls and toys, even chemicals and soaps, animal ointments, clay tablets with inscription. But in that landfill, you also find trash. That's my lesson today. I'm going to call my lesson Finding Trash in the Dumpster. Rosa Parks was one of those treasures. She was born black in 1913, raised in the rural south of the U.S., and her parents descended from slaves. She gave up, or she rather grew up, as a seamstress in Montgomery, Alabama. Christmas was approaching that year. It was December the 1st, 1955. Rosa Parks was 42 years old. She was going to work that morning, and she didn't drive. She rode the bus. But after work, she got back on her bus, took an empty seat in the back, in that last section. A city ordinance not only barred blacks from sitting in the front of the bus, it also required them to relinquish their seats to any white person standing. Well, the front of the bus filled up. The white driver ordered Rosa Parks to give up her seat to the white man. Rosa didn't move. She just stayed put. The driver, he stopped the bus, called the police. Rosa was arrested, locked up. All she did that afternoon was leave work, tired after a long day, got on a bus. She wasn't trying to make a fuss or a disturbance. She just wanted a quiet ride home. Well, the United States didn't know it, but they were about to discover their greatest treasure that had ever been found, right in their trash can. Rosa was black. She was simply a garbage can to the white society. On her way home that day on the Montgomery bus, she was only a tired seamstress, but she was also tired of the injustice of the social activity of her people. She didn't think a woman should be forced to stand so a man could sit down. And yet her simple act of courage set in motion a chain of events that changed forever the landscape of American race relations. And before she died, she said this to the question, "Why did you do it?" Here was her answer. After so many years of oppression and being a victim of mistreatment that my people had suffered, not giving up my seat or whatever it was that I faced by not giving it up was not important to me. I didn't have any feelings of any fear of sitting in that seat that I was sitting in. All I felt was tired. Tired of always relinquishing my seat. Tired of seeing the bad treatment and the disrespect of children, women, and men just because of the color of their skin. Rosa that afternoon was found guilty. But African American leaders in Montgomery, they quickly rallied around her. And they planned a bus boycott that was going to stretch for 381 days. Longer than a year. No blacks riding a bus. Rosa Parks was not trash. She was going to become a treasure that the black people were waiting for. And by saying no to injustice, she triggered one of the most dramatic demonstrations of nonviolence and protesting in the history of American race relations. Living in Montgomery at the time were 48,000 African Americans who began to demonstrate. Hundreds of white sympathizers joined in. Buses in the black community, they rode empty with no passengers. The local Black Baptist pastor also joined in. His name was Martin Luther King, only 26 years old at the time. He became Rosa's spokesman. Rosa's dream was fulfilled. She envisioned a better world in which her people can come together, can live as one. And the next time that you pick up a new American $20 bill, take a look at the picture on the front. You're going to see the face of Rosa Parks. Her favorite verse from the Bible told her her motivation. Let hope keep you joyful. Be patient in your troubles. Romans 12:12. That was Rosa's motivation. Here's my lesson today. How you look at life is going to determine how you live. Jesus said, your eyes are the windows into your body. And if you open your eyes good and wide, you're going to see wonder that you've never seen before. But if you live squinty-eyed and greedy and distrust, your body will be a dark alley, just a cellar. Matthew 6:22. On the night before Jesus died, Jesus' dumpster filled up with trash. But remember, archaeologists find trash to be treasured. On the night before the events of Calvary, Jesus is going to show you something that most of us don't see. Somewhere between the happenings in Gethsemane and the following mock trial that night was trash, dumped on Jesus like the world had never witnessed. And during that 12 hours, Jesus is going to suffer loss. You can't imagine that loss. Jesus didn't face one good thing. Nobody came to his rescue. Nobody said anything good in those 12 hours. All he showed was courage. And the only one that had real human character. Jesus became that night the world's dumpster. All Jesus got out of that 12 hours was deceit and betrayal. Only a week before, he was welcomed in Jerusalem with palm leaves, celebration of a national hero. By Friday night of the same week, he was welcomed with fists and swords. From the triumphal entry came the fatal plunge. Even his followers fled, and they left him alone. Let me describe for you that darkest night in Jesus' life. 3 things are going to tell you what happened. 1, rejection. 2, revenge. 3, renegades on the run. First, rejection. Matthew 26:39. Jesus was praying alone in the garden. He's talking to God in heaven. My Father, he says, if it's possible, don't let me suffer like this. Please remove this cup that I have been made to drink. But you do what you want. You do what's best for me, not what I want. Jesus said that in anguish, and he fell to the ground when he cried out. Luke tells this Friday night event this way. When Jesus fell, it was pain, and the sweat was like drops of blood falling on the ground. Luke 22:44. Just picture that rejection. Well, that's the fist in Jesus' face. Now comes the next sword. Revenge. Judas, the betrayer, he shows up just as Jesus gets up off his knees. He arrives bringing an angry crowd. The very people whom Jesus came to save have now come to arrest him. No one knows how big the crowd was. The Bible doesn't tell us. But we do know there are a number of soldiers, and they were armed. We know that they formed a big mob. They had enough troops to stop a major revolt or even an insurrection. Was Jesus that big a threat to them? Isn't there going to be just one who can defend him? Look at all that he did. Look at all that he gave to those crowds that came after him. All those moving sermons that he preached. All those miracles. The healings, they'd heard about it. The dinners provided, the forgiveness, the comforts, the restorations. They all knew that. Surely it's now going to bear fruit in his darkest hour. Someone has to come and yell out, this man is innocent. No one came. There he was. No one rescued him. That's revenge. The people he came to save turned against him. How would you like to have that sword in your back? Thirdly, now comes renegades on the run. Jesus could forgive the crowd for what they did and their behavior. But here's the most bitter pill, I think, of all. Matthew 26:56. All of Jesus' followers left him and ran away. Jesus' disciples, they'd been with him now for 3 years. Suddenly, when the chips are down, they all become turncoats and they flee. I can't imagine at that moment how Jesus must have felt. All of Jesus' followers ran away. How would you like to swallow that aspirin? Jesus had to. He saw John run. Matthew, who's telling us the story, he ran. Simon ran. Thomas ran. They all did. There was nobody left. You don't have to go too far back in your gospel record to recall what Peter said, Lord, I'll never run. Everybody else can take off, but it won't be me. Verse 35, Matthew 26. You will never hear me say, Jesus, that I don't know you. Well, all Jesus' followers, when he heard him say that, agreed. Just like Peter. But that night before, the night was out. A rooster crowed in the early morning, signaling Peter's renegade on the run. All said they were loyal. All of them ran. So there you have the 3 things dumped in Jesus' trash can. 1, no answer from heaven, rejected by the Father. 2, no help from the people, total reversal. 3, no loyalty from his disciples, renegades on the run. Well, how much trash can a person take? I told you what Rosa Parks took. You heard now what Jesus took. How much can you take? What's in your trash can? You've faced heartache. You've been betrayed. Maybe you're Rosa Parks and you're facing a mob right now. Does somebody want your seat at work? Are you suffering from job insecurity and somebody's going to take it? I'm going to conclude this talk by telling you what to do when trash comes your way. Jesus is going to show you how to handle rough times. Here are 2 ideas to help you. These are his. 1, you can always find a rose among the thorns. Jesus turned evil into good. How would you like to have Judas as your friend? The Bible calls him a thief. He was the treasurer of the 12 disciples, and he often stole from their purse, John 12, verse 6. This man, he lived in the presence of God for 3 years. He witnessed miracles. He saw lives changed. He witnessed the dead coming to life again. But all that didn't change him. He still was a thief. The 30 pieces of silver, he gave up a friendship for greed. That Friday night, Jesus kept his friendship with Judas right up until the very end. In verse 50 of Matthew 26, Jesus said to him when the soldiers arrived, friend, do what you came to do. None of you listening to me are in the category that you haven't been betrayed. We've all been betrayed. Those that betray us are victims of a fallen world. Often they can't help themselves. Well, we face evil all the time. Jesus saw good in the face of Judas. He even called him his friend. I couldn't do that. Jesus would scold me if I told you, if that were Judas with me, I'd have spit in his face. We live in a world of darkness. Luke 22:53. When people hurt you, do you turn the other cheek? Do you call them a friend? Watch what happens. Look for the rose among the thorns. Here's a second thing Jesus tells us. Roses grow in unusual places. Jesus had predicted what would happen that Friday night in chapter 26, 54 of Matthew. It must happen this way, said Jesus, to bring about what the scripture says. And again, he said the same thing in Matthew 26, 56. All these things have happened so that it'll come about as the prophet wrote. Jesus saw the big picture. He wants you to see the same. You see the big picture. What happened in Gethsemane is really the grand masterpiece for all of our lives. God has a divine order. His suffering was necessary. Maybe mine is too, and maybe yours is as well. God wants you to see the world through Jesus' eyes. Jesus had in his arsenal a real bunker buster. Do you know what it was? When you get to 53 of Matthew 26, here's what Jesus said that night. Surely you know, I could ask my Father in heaven and he'd give me more than 12 armies of angels to come and rescue me. Talk about a treasure in Jesus' trash can. This is the best of all. I think one day when you and I get to heaven, God's going to show you his trained army of angels. We're going to be shocked. Jesus saw his Father in heaven there in the garden. God was with him all along. Jesus, for a moment, didn't think he was there, but then he saw him. Sometimes you can't see him with you either, but he's there. Imagine 12 armies of angels waiting at Jesus' command. He didn't get the command. Neither should you. I've told you this lesson simply to change the way you see life. God isn't going to remove your struggle, but he will change the way you look at your struggles. Paul said in Romans 8:35, in all these things we are more than conquerors, victory, through God being at our side, through him who loved us. Let your hope keep you joyful, be patient in your troubles, said Rosa Parks. Well, Jesus, along with Rosa Parks, he can take your trash can and he can let it become your rose bush. Try it and see what happens. I'll look for you the next time you come my way. Thanks for joining me today.